Today I would like to discuss market socialism, or the idea that you can have workers control over the means of production while maintaining commodity production, money, markets, the profit motive, and the competitive mechanism. The basic gist of it is that all of the components of capitalism are left intact, but the firms are jointly owned and controlled by the workers themselves, rather than privately by CEOs and shareholders of the company. Revisionist, Chomskyite, and Radlib, Destiny Reloaded, is an advocate of such a cursed idealist system. He is one who claims to be a Marxist and yet overlooks the fact that Marx's magnum opus, Das Kapital, is one large critique of markets in general, and would stand in opposition to any kind of economy that Destiny 2, Judgment Day, is in favor of. But today I shall save my ire for Destiny, the Two Towers, for another video, and instead focus exclusively on my critique of market socialism as a system. So first off, let us take into account that capitalism as a system is not just characterized by private ownership over the means of production. For if this was the sole characteristic, then feudal and slave economies could be classified as capitalist as well. Capitalism is commodity production in its highest form, where goods are produced first as exchange values and as use values second. The goal of the system is profits, or the extortion of surplus value. Within the anarchy of the market, as heavily explored in Capital, within the circulation of money and commodities, value is conserved in each exchange, and there is a propensity towards unequal exchange within the market, which causes the system to gravitate towards income inequality. And since the basic psychology of capitalism has remained intact, and since there are other ways to extract surplus value outside of the traditional relationship between wage labor and capital, what you would begin to see in such a system in time is co-ops beginning to make decisions that trends towards the consolidation of wealth in a very similar manner to capitalism. Even if co-ops are democratically owned and controlled by workers, the bosses and managers that they elect would be able to argue for the good of the company that certain decisions would have to be taken to improve their competitive edge. And if one firm isn't making said decisions to increase their competitive power, another firm will come along and do so, allowing them to secure more market share. One possibility that is highly realistic in such a system is that the more well-off and successful co-ops begin to outsource their labor to the smaller ones, paying them lower wages than what they would pay their regular employees, and beginning the process of surplus value extraction anew. The logical result of this is the emergence of a labor aristocracy, or a sect of the working class who have their high wages supplemented by the surplus value extracted by the smaller co-ops. And if this in any way sounds far-fetched, allow me to provide you a real-life example of such a phenomenon taking place. The Mondragon Corporation is the world's largest cooperative, with over 74,000 employees and an annual revenue of 12 billion euros as of 2015. Today, it encompasses 110 cooperatives and 147 subsidiary companies. These subsidiaries, mind you, are non-cooperative and employ thousands of the company's employees. In fact, as the company has expanded over the years and outsources its labor to low-wage countries such as Mexico, Morocco, Thailand, and China, the share of non-members of the Mondragon Corporation has grown to encompass nearly a third of its workforce. These non-members, mind you, are afforded lower wages and inferior benefits compared to their member counterparts, meaning that there is an underclass of employees being exploited by the larger co-op. And no, this isn't me trying to tear down Mondragon. I think they're a great alternative to traditional capitalism, but this example goes to show that in a system of ruthless competition, exploitation, wage labor, money and markets, that if cooperative firms are expected to grow and compete, that they will have to take on more characteristics of traditional firms. Another example as to how co-ops can exploit one another outside of outsourcing would be through the use of loans. That is, bigger co-ops gaming the system by lending capital to smaller co-ops at an accrued interest rate as another means to bypass the barrier to exploitation caused by democratic control over companies. Loans come with interest. Interest creates debt. And remember, there is still a market, and co-ops are poised to compete with one another and game the system to grow and expand in any way that they can. So this sort of phenomenon is a real possibility. It is a psychological law of adaptation that people will behave in this way in the context of a market economy, and to claim that co-ops will simply stick to their principles and ethically compete is to make the same argument that right libertarians make with respect to small businesses ethically competing with one another. Even if some co-ops decide to stick to their principles and not engage in exploitative behavior, they will inevitably be outcompeted by others who will. Once again, to truly understand Marxism is to understand that a free market economy is really an anarchist economy. There is no rhyme or reason to it, no overall plan. And though the contradiction between workers and owners could be mitigated in a co-op economy, I fail to see how simply having the workers own and control the means of production mitigates the crisis of overproduction, the crisis of breakdown, the falling rate of profit, or growing income inequality, or the buildup of the reserve army of labor, or any of the other contradictions that are strongly associated with the market economy. And if your answer to these problems is government regulation, well, now you've gone from making the same flawed conservative arguments to making the same flawed liberal arguments. You can make it more difficult to engage in certain problematic behavior through the apparatus of the state if you like, but you can't take away the will to engage in said behavior within the context of a market economy. It's the same reason why social democracy isn't sustainable either. I'll make this same point as many times as I need to, but countries all across Europe have been gutting spending to the public sector as well as implementing tax cuts and deregulations for decades. It would only be a matter of time before you would have a situation like the one we endure today, where there is a kind of neoliberal counter-revolution launching an assault on the public sector. Now, this is not to say that a co-op economy wouldn't be good as a sort of NEP after the revolution to give people a feel for workers' control as we transition to full socialism. However, if the logic of market economies remains intact long enough, if there isn't a push or move towards actual socialism at some point, then the logic and rationale for a capitalist restoration becomes apparent and inevitable for the simple reason that markets engender capitalism. As the propensity for larger co-ops to engage in exploitative behavior external to their own cliques will drive the creation of a labor aristocracy and a repressed underclass of wage earners who labor for the benefit of a few. So then what's the alternative to utopian socialism, you might ask? Simple. Scientific socialism. Socialism as envisioned by Marx and Engels 150 years ago, with the abolition of money and markets in favor of economic planning and a voucher economy. You abolish the commodity form and the circulation of money, produce goods as use values first, and have the whole economy cooperating towards a common good rather than fighting like spoiled children in this game that we conjured up when we didn't have anything better. In summary, we need a rationally planned economy based on resources, and not based on everybody trying to personally enrich themselves, social consequences be damned.